Hi, I'm Rolf with Shooter's Paradise. We hear a lot of different things when it comes to what we should do to protect ourselves for self defense, use of force. Different experts have different opinions and they tell us different things. And I have to make up my mind which expert I'm going to follow. That can be a very tough thing if I don't know great detail ins and outs of each individual topic. So I've come up with a list of three things that I think are helpful to help us identify what we ought to do tactically in any given situation. And by tactically, what I'm talking about is the practical application of our shooting skills to defend ourselves. So, what does it mean to defend ourselves? What shooting skills are, how are we going to use them? That's what I'm thinking there when I speak about tactics. So shooting and being able to hit the bullseye is one set of skills that's a prerequisite for us to use force with a pistol to save our own lives or the lives of a family member. That's a prerequisite. Then, how do we apply that? That's really what I'm looking at here. So the three things that I think we ought to consider when we're looking at what tactics we think we ought to employ are, number one, will it keep me alive? And that's not a yes and no answer most of the time. Most of the time, that's a sliding scale, and you have to weigh it in your own mind as you see fit, what percentage or what strength you're going to give that aspect of it. I might say, well, I would say that this is 80% more likely to keep me alive than this other thing, and rate it 80-20. And you may have 50-50 and 30-70. There may be different weights like that you apply to different things. But the question is, will it keep me alive? What is more likely here to create a situation that it enhances my ability to live through the encounter? Number two, does it fit into my moral and ethical code? We all have a code or a set of ethics we live by. And quite frankly, we need to be able to live with ourselves after we live through the event. So these are in order of importance for me. Number one, the most important thing is I live through the event. Second thing is I can live with myself. It would be a horrible thing if I did something in self-defense and then couldn't live with the aftermath that occurred from it. So I need to know what I believe, and I need to know how what I'm looking at doing fits into that. And then the third thing will be, is it legal? And that also is probably not a hard and fast yes or no answer, because there's always what we would consider gray areas in the legal system. Unfortunately, every situation has its own specific details and specifics. And we can't make a blanket overall statement about legality of something without knowing every tiny detail, which is pretty impossible to know. So we can speak in generalities and we can know that this area is very firm ground to stand on legally, this area is quicksand to stand on, and that area over there is outright illegal. We can break it down like that, but we can't get into a specific, this is absolutely legal and that's absolutely illegal, because there's a gray area. And also, human beings are administering this, and human beings are fallible and have opinions. So there you go. So our three things are, and this is in considering what tactics I want to use, how do I want to apply my shooting skills in a self-defense situation. Number one, will it keep me alive? Or what is most likely to keep me alive and safe in the encounter? Two, does it fit into my moral and ethical code? And three, is it legal? So let's run through a couple questions here that are pretty commonly bandied about and see how this works and see if this three-question test works for us. And again, what I think will be very different than what you think based on how you weight things and your personal opinions and beliefs, which is cool. So the first question we'll look at here is, should I carry with an empty chamber? There are some experts who will tell you that you should carry with an empty chamber, and as you draw your firearm, you should rack the slide to then engage and load the gun as you draw. So the experts that are proponents of this oftentimes are very highly skilled in doing that action. I'm not. I would bet that you're not either. So let's look at it from the first question in our test. Will it keep me alive? Fact of the matter is you're more likely to get harmed, hurt, killed by trying to load the firearm on the draw than you are to carry with one in the chamber all the time. Act of self-protection, studied tons and tons and tons of these events, and he has several where people have died trying to get the gun loaded. They had an unloaded gun and tried to get it loaded, and that did not pan out well for them. Another thing I would point out to you is that oftentimes with new, smaller guns in particular, you will insert a magazine, rack the slide, and it won't feed properly, and the gun will jam on loading. That's actually quite common with some of the smaller semi-automatics. That's a good way to end up dead if you're fighting for your life. So I would not want to do that. I think that it is very unlikely to have a great effect at keeping me alive and not having one in the chamber. It is highly likely that it will lead to my being hurt or killed with not having one in the chamber. That's my opinion. I think there's a lot of evidence for that. Number two, does it fit into my moral and ethical code? I don't see where the question of whether I have an empty chamber or a loaded chamber is a moral issue. For me, that's not an issue. There may be moral issues out there for somebody, but it's not for me. So number two wouldn't really apply. And then, is it legal? And the answer there is I'm unaware of any legality anywhere that speaks to an empty chamber carry versus a loaded chamber carry. So for me, the only part of the test that applies is its efficacy at keeping me alive, and its carry with an empty chamber is much more likely to get me killed. So for me, that's a no. And then, next one, should I draw the gun and warn the criminal, or should I wait to draw the gun until I intend to shoot? This one gets a bit of debate from time to time. So, number one, will it keep me alive? Well, I strongly feel that this will definitely have great impact toward keeping me alive, because the fastest draw is already having the gun in your hand. Absolutely. So you can work until you've got a 1 second or less draw to first shot. That's all well and good. But if I've already got the gun in my hand, I'm going to be way faster than that. That's the way cookie crumbles. So from a perspective of will it keep me alive, getting the gun out as soon as it is legally justifiable is going to be the very best thing for me. Number two, does it fit into my moral and ethical code? Well, it does fit into my moral and ethical code, because I'm giving that individual one last chance to break off and leave me alone before I have to use force against him. That's a tremendous thing, because if I don't have to shoot them, then they don't get hurt. They may not be, they may not die in the encounter. That's a tremendous thing. From a moral aspect, that I didn't have to kill that person, that's a tremendously valuable thing. So from number two, should I draw the gun and warn them? The answer is a resounding yes. And then, is it legal? Number three. Well, I kind of specified that this would be drawing after I was legally justified to do so. And the fact of the matter is there is a point in time where you are legally justified in pointing a firearm at another person and warning them that continuing to do or escalating what they're doing is going to lead to very bad results. That's perfectly legal in the right circumstances. And of course, it's my duty to know that. So for me, that's a resounding yes, looking at it from those three question perspective. How about another question? Should I drag them in the house? That's a great one. Should I drag them in the house after I shoot them? Right? Because we get more protections from prosecution if the shooting occurred inside the house. So, number one, will it keep me alive? No, it's not going to have any effect, because the shooting already happened. So there's no benefit to be gained there. Well, that that's not great because I'm looking for these benefits. Number two, does it fit into my moral and ethical code? The answer there is going to be no, it doesn't. Because the act of dragging somebody in the house is an act of covering up something. And that is not going to fit into my moral code. I'm going to have a problem with that. So that would make the answer a no on number two. Number three, is it legal? And the answer to that is going to be no, because you are messing with a potential crime scene. That's going to be illegal. Tampering with evidence. There's all kinds of different, depending on your locale, will stipulate what law is in play there, but it's going to be illegal to do that. You're going to be breaking a law if you drag somebody into the house. And more importantly, in the eyes of the court, this is going to be seen as an admission of guilt. I knew I had done something wrong, so I had to try to cover it up. That's horrible, horrible, horrible. That's the worst piece of advice that could ever be given to anybody. Should I drag them in the house? That's just beyond bad. In some jurisdictions, it's going to be illegal even to suggest it, which is going to be called subornation of perjury. It's a very, very bad thing. So looking at that, there's several resounding no's in my test of 3 questions there. So that's going to be a no. I shouldn't drag them in the house. How about this question? Should I go outside if someone is stealing my car? Should I go outside if somebody is stealing my car? Well, let's apply our 3-question test to this. Will it keep me alive? The answer to that is I'm far safer if I stay in my house. So the act of going outside and getting involved in some kind of a confrontation with a criminal is going to greatly increase the chance of my death. I don't know if he's got a gun. I go outside to confront somebody stealing my car. He may have a gun. He may just shoot and kill me right there. So from the most important perspective, will it keep me alive? The answer is no, this is not going to help keep me alive. So I should not do it from that perspective alone. Let's look at the other questions. Does it fit into my moral and ethical code? Well, I have a deep-seated feeling that it's wrong for somebody to steal my property, and I should run out there and be the wheels of justice and all, and that, quite frankly, is not correct. So even though it may feel like this is a moral thing to do, in fact, it's not for me. Should I go outside if someone is stealing my car? Viewed from the 3rd question, is it legal? Well, it's not legal for me to go out of my house, but I sure can get into some serious legal trouble if I go outside and get involved in defense of property and I end up killing the other person over property, because I'm not allowed to do that and I'll be facing prison. That will be illegal. In Louisiana, you cannot use deadly force to protect property. So if I go outside and I'm simply protecting the property and the other guy dies, I'm in serious trouble. So from that, looking at those 3 questions, it would be a pretty resounding no that I shouldn't go outside if someone's stealing my car. I ought to call the police. I ought to take pictures from the safety of my home. Whatever this can be done. If I've got a ring system, I should yell at them through the ring system. I would not go outside myself and lay hands on anyone who's stealing my car. Let's look at our 3 questions that we want to consider when we're considering tactics, and look at, should I stop a shoplifter? So this one is pretty easy also. The first question, will it keep me alive? Well, this is going to greatly increase the chance of my death because I don't know if he's got a gun. Maybe he does. Maybe he's got a gun and he's a person that would shoot and kill me in a heartbeat. So getting involved with a shoplifter is going to be problematic for me from that perspective. And from that perspective alone, because it's the most important question for me, I'm going to say absolutely not. But let's look at the other 2 questions. Does it fit into my moral and ethical code? Well, perhaps it does. Perhaps it falls into my moral code to go out there and stop a shoplifter, but I would caution you that it may not fall into the moral code of other people, and their view of you is going to be important after the event. If everyone in your town is upset with you for having done it, you may not be able to stay in your town if you had to kill the person. You may have to move to a new place and start a new life. Yes, if you own a business, people may quit coming to your business because you're the guy that killed that guy, right? There's a lot of things to play in mind there. So it may fit into my moral code, but I would caution you that it may not fit into other people's moral code also. Although me being okay with what I did is what's really important. So number 3, is it legal? Should I stop a shoplifter? Well, in Louisiana, if it's a felony that they're committing, then yes, it's legal for me to do it. Is it smart for me to do it? The answer to that is absolutely not. Because what I'm doing is making a citizen's arrest. When law enforcement makes an arrest, law enforcement acting under the color of law, they get what's called qualified immunity, where I can't just go sue the law enforcement officer for what happened in the arrest because he's got some immunity to that. When you make a citizen's arrest, you have no immunity. You are responsible for absolutely everything. You can be sued for all of it. And in fact, if the DA thought that what you did was an improper citizen's arrest, the DA could the DA could charge you with a crime for that. So while it may not be illegal to stop a shoplifter in your location, there may be other legal considerations that muddy the water and make it less than desirable. For me, the answer is no, I wouldn't stop a shoplifter, primarily because the number 1 question, will it keep me alive? My risk of death is way higher in trying to stop a shoplifter. So anyway, here's a few questions that we get faced with from time to time, or we need to address ourselves as people who are carrying a firearm, preparing to defend ourselves against a deadly threat. And these 3 questions help us pretty quickly evaluate whether or not that tactic is a good thing, that application of our skills in using a firearm for self-defense. Number 1, will it keep me alive? Number 2, does it fit in my moral and ethical code? And number 3, is it legal? Try that out. Give it some thought. Look at some of the things that you're wondering about whether you should do or not, and see if that helps you make in your decision making about what you should do. We appreciate you, really appreciate you watching this. We'll see you again soon.